Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast and the Toolbox Extra. We'll be right back with this week's Toolbox guest, but as always, we want to give a shout out to our sponsors. Now, remember, these are companies, they're all great companies for athletic directors and coaches. You should be using them. So take 3 minutes, listen to our shout outs, then listen to our Toolbox Extra guest, and then go and visit each one of these sponsors. I'm telling you, you're going to be glad you did. Here we go. We want to say thanks to Sideline Interactive indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and you can schedule a live web demo to see their products in action. Probably one of the best equipment purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Go to sidelineinteractive.com. Schedule that live web demo today. Let's also thank Huddle for their support. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure that our school was a Huddle school. Our coaches, our student athletes, even our parents just loved the Huddle platform. Go to huddle.com, join the 100 million users and fans, and turn your school into a Huddle school. That's huddle.com. Let's also say thanks to Home Campus. Home Campus is a platform you're going to use every day for scheduling, rosters, results. How about their athletic eligibility and clearance platform? I'm telling you, it's a game changer. Go to homecampus.com for more information. That's homecampus.com. We want to thank our good friends at Beacon Creative and Vital Signs Wall of Fame. Now, Wall of Fame has been helping schools bring their legacy to life for a decade, but Beacon Creative takes it to a whole new level. Beacon Creative is a content creation platform that's going to take your data, your stories, your student athletes, and create compelling stories, compelling narratives that you can then upload on your digital media platforms. You really got to see it to believe it. I want you to email John Townsend, and you can do that at John, John, at beaconwalloffame.com. Beacon Creative and Vital Signs. It's a winning team. We also want to say thanks to our great friends at Hometown. Now, Hometown continues to be a game changer with their solutions that include things like, digital ticketing, of course, but how about fee-free fundraising, athletic website construction? The list just goes on and on. Go to Hometown for more information. That's hometown.com. They're going to show you how to save time, how to raise more money, and how to bring your community together. That's hometown.com. We also want to thank Ohio University and their online masters in athletic administration. My assistant athletic director, along with thousands of others, got his master's through the Ohio program, and it was a great experience. Check out Ohio University and their online masters in athletic administration. We want to say thanks to our newest sponsor, Booster Hub. It's the #1 Booster Club software program. You need boosters that can deliver results, not create headaches. And Booster Hub is going to do that for you. Sponsorship payments, meal plans, concession sales, it now flows through their secure system. Booster Hub also handles communication, volunteer scheduling, online spiritware sales, and it keeps your booster roster current. And when boosters do change, nothing falls through the cracks. Give your boosters the platform they need, the platform they deserve to truly support your athletes. Boosterhub.com. And we want to thank our good friends at Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. At my school, we use surveys for everything, for student athletes, for coaches, even parents. And the information that came back, almost always over the top positive. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of everybody in your program. That's athleticsurveys.com. And we want to say thanks to Gipper. Go to Gipper.com and let their team of experts help you become a social media marketing guru. Modernize your online and on-campus marketing and make sure that the great work your athletic department is doing doesn't go unnoticed. Gipper provides the tools to help you tell your story, engage your audience, and grow your brand. Go to Gipper.com for more information. And as always, don't forget to mention the podcast. That's Gipper.com. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast and a segment we like to call the Toolbox Extra. Regular listeners of the podcast certainly recognize today's guest, Dr. Courtney Beck. We had Courtney on, it seems like maybe 2 years ago initially. Just did a great job. She's become one of our go-to people. A little bit about Courtney if you haven't heard. And if you haven't heard, you need to go back to Spotify, check our archives, and take a look at all of her episodes. She has an incredible background. She was an All-American athlete, Division I athlete. I think she might share a little bit of that today. Also had a successful stint as a college coach. She's now gone on to become, the founder and CEO of her own business. She's a podcast host. She's a speaker at the highest level. Dr. Courtney Beck, welcome back to the Educational AD Podcast.
Jake, I am so excited to be back. We were just talking about this. It has been a second, and I just really do. I want to say what an honor it is to be on your podcast. And thank you for everything you do, because I must say, as you had mentioned, I host a podcast, but my goodness, I think I come out on average with one per week, and I even take a week off. You are here every single day, Jake. And so you really do. You do so much for the athletic community at various levels, as we know, AD, coaches, students, student athletes. And so such an honor to be here. But today I thought we would dive into I'm going to speak about the comeback story in gymnastics that I experienced and how this kind of relates to. I've really been taking a deep dive into youth sports and understanding kind of like the youth sport crisis as far as student athletes leaving sports at certain ages and how we could kind of pull this all together as far as the story that I will certainly speak about, but then even like the life lessons and how we could educate youth to maybe see the bigger picture of what sport offers. And obviously there's a multitude of factors. So that could be, of course, injuries could lead to, leaving the sport. Burnout is certainly one. And that's kind of like the direction I want to take this as far as addressing more so of that and like the encouragement and the inspiration of the long-term life lessons that youth could learn from staying in sports. And so to first begin, I wanted to start off with a quote. This is out of the Kinesiology Review. This is in 2024, strictly a statement within the study. But quote, organized sport participation trends indicate that 50 to 70% of youth in westernized nations participate in sport programs. Yet, roughly 35% of participants leave youth sport programs annually. And by the age of 13, it is estimated that 70% of youth leave sport. And so I am sure that your audience, of course, like I said, with a lot of sports, whether it's coaches, ADs, or student athletes, are very familiar with this information. But I just want to lay that solid foundation because my experience, specifically in the sport of gymnastics, I'll kind of just take you through, but it was exactly like around the age of 13. So I just wanted to speak about that research first. But there I was, Jake, my goodness, give or take as far as, mommy and me classes you would enter, but then you start, climbing the competitive ladder, so to speak. And I remember probably it was like 3 or 4. I was like jumping off of the sofas, right, in the living room. And dad's like, whoa, we cannot do this. This is obviously not going to be a good thing. Probably injuries will occur. So there I was, entered in the sport of gymnastics. And I truly fell in love with that sport. And I talk about this a lot. that sport it's very unique in the sense of course, it encompasses four events, but in my young mind, I thought of that as like four different sports, all combined in one. And so there was always something to work on, strength, flexibility, how you carry yourself with grace. And so it really did. It took me all the way up the ladder to the international elite level. And as we all know, when you are climbing those levels in any sport for that matter, the hours start increasing. And so I was roughly about 13, 14. But there I was, had an injury, elbow injury. And I decided at that point, and it was also just even like just some burnout too, injury, like I said. And so I did. I actually left the sport at that point. And what's really interesting is that when I first initially left, I did not realize the amount of discipline that sport teaches us. I mean, really, my grades actually started to fall. And so my father quickly told me, no way, you are getting into another sport of some capacity. And I did. It opened up my mind. I went into track, I did a little bit of cross country, some other sports. But during that time, it was a different sport. It was something new to learn that kept me kind of hooked in sport. But at the same time, during those 3 years that I was out of sport, and this was pretty much in my high school years. So, like I said, about 13, 14, I ended up leaving. I would return to the sport of gymnastics when I was about 17 years old. I had already got admitted to the University of Florida, and I was so excited, Jake, because the University of Florida, I went to their summer camps when I was 8 years old, and I could not wait to enter into Florida. But at the time, I was not in the sport of gymnastics. And so I mention this because it really built a sense of humility in me that you could go climbing all the way up to the international elite level. And yet, when you left that sport 3 years later and you decide, hey, maybe I do want to have, I knew I only had one more shot if I even could consider it. But to really go for that and to be back into the sport that I love the most. And so I was going to have to start from rock bottom. And that's where the humility part came in. And I remember approaching my coach. We had a plan laid out. And make a long story short, I actually started the comeback. Well, little would I know, my elbow injury from 3 years prior started to creep in, went to the doctors. I had to get surgery if I was going to actually follow through with this comeback. And so once I got to the University of Florida, the actual training, getting back into the sport, it took at least a year. And I think that's another lesson is that as we all know, progression in any sport takes time, let alone a sport that you were already in, but then you have to rebuild all your strength. But in today's world, I say this because I really do think it's so important that a lot of us, I mean, even including myself, it's like you want this success overnight. But as we know, it does not happen that way. And I think that's where the power of sport comes in to teach you, to allow you to understand humility, discipline, to show up each and every day. I had to acknowledge, obviously, at that point, regardless of what I had done in the past and the level that I had made, I basically had to start over and prove myself. And when I entered into the University of Florida, I was a walk on. I did not have a scholarship at all. And I think that also speaks to another point is that, we can make certain levels in our lives at different sports, but yet you have to prove yourself each and every time. And for me, 3 years out, I had to prove myself again. It's not obviously what you did 3 years ago, but what could you do today? And so going through the sport of gymnastics at the University of Florida, I mean, truly supportive coaches. I just want to give a shout out to, she was my coach during the time, but Rhonda Fain and the assistant coaches, because that opportunity provided me so much even confidence as a young woman, building up that confidence that I would be able to later take on in my professional career. As you said, like going into entrepreneurship, starting your own business. But I really do feel that that foundation of confidence that was built in sport helped me to have that mentality to go for things and not to have that sense of fear of failure, if you will, but to try things and to understand, as we all know in sport, when you try something, you can never regret it. You know, I think about gymnastics, you physically fall sometimes on your face, not intending, but you're learning new skills. But it teaches you the humility, it teaches you the discipline to get back up, the resilience. All three of those life lessons, I feel, are so incredibly important as especially a youth in sports, how that could take them on in their professional careers. And so I say this, when I was at the University of Florida, never in my mind would I ever imagine that with that opportunity that those coaches had presented to me, that 3, 4 years later, I would graduate. And you had mentioned this, but as an NCAA All-American and two SEC championship team titles, I was a member of. And it taught me a lot about exactly what I said, never fear failure. At the starting point, really didn't have much to lose. I was going for it to try that comeback after 3 years of being out of the sport. But then also, as I would reflect later on in my life, how that shaped me, how that molded me, is truly remarkable. The impact. You didn't even realize actually what was occurring at that moment in time. But when you look back, it taught me humility that even in your professional career, you are going to make mistakes. You are going to be wrong. Sometimes we don't want to be wrong, but unfortunately, sometimes we are. And how do you build up that character? Do you acknowledge that you're wrong? Do you kind of swallow that humility? I think that's important. I think the discipline that it taught me, that if I was going to make a successful comeback, obviously barring, no injuries, I was going to have to be in there each and every day, if not even more, really trying to get my strength back, especially initially before I even entered the University of Florida. And so it spoke about the love that I have for sport. And I think that's what's so important, that as I speak about this comeback story, I know ADs, coaches, maybe even student athletes are thinking like, but what about me? What's in it for me as far as like the knowledge and the information? And what I'm here to say, especially for coaches and ADs, even maybe like yearly meetings when you're gathering all those athletes together to start that fresh year, is to really drive home the lessons that they learn in sport and how that really translates many, many years later. How, if you go into entrepreneurship, it teaches you, I mean, you need the resilience, you need the ability to overcome what I call perceived failure. I don't believe in failure. I believe that we make mistakes and maybe we took a left, but we were supposed to take a right, right? And so I just speak about that because at least providing them a long-term kind of look into the future, that if in fact they are struggling in this present moment at the age of 13 or even younger, that they could see long term. Obviously, like I said, I understand barring, injuries and stuff, but just mentality of how important sport could be in our lives and how it really does. It shapes and it molds us for our future. And so the comeback story, like I said, I just really wanted to bring it up because I feel that by having that lived experience and to be able to share it with others, what truly was once in my eyes and even in my coach's eyes when we first met, after 3 years, it was the impossible. It was the impossible of, after 3 years, Courtney, do you really want to try this? I mean, like, that's almost kind of crazy. Like, he would even tell me he like has athletes after a month who took maybe summer break and it's difficult to get back in. But I really did. I had that love and that drive for the sport. And I think that's really, if we could just nurture that for youth, the love, the fun of the sport, but understanding the life lessons, that maybe that is something that we could hold on to, or that they could hold on to, excuse me, as they are maybe struggling or going through difficult times in sport. But it teaches us that in life, not everything is going to be perfect. Not every day is going to be a good day, but how do we work through that? So, Jake, that is the comeback story that I've also kind of mixed in with youth sports and kind of addressing the decline in youth sports, but then also how ADs and coaches could really drive home those life lessons for the athlete to witness the big picture.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Very personal, but I don't think you can appreciate how appropriate your story is. Athletic directors nowadays and coaches nowadays, whether it's high school or youth, many of the parents of the athletes that they are working with did not have the athletic experience that you had, that I had, that many of the coaches had, and they don't understand that whole idea of failure, trying a new skill, maybe being challenged, maybe we could even say failing, but having that coach there to lift them up to, hey, let's coach them and get them through that challenge, let them overcome that failure. On the parents, in their very well intentions, they want to remove any chance of failure for their kid. They don't want their child to experience the pain of failure, and they just don't understand that's how we get better. That's how we get better in sport. And as you alluded to, that's how we get better in life so we can meet those challenges we're going to have. So, again, message is 100% spot on. And thank you so much for sharing with our listeners. That sound that you don't hear, that's all of our athletic director listeners, applauding for such a great message.
Thank you so much, Jake. And even when you speak about parents, I must say that my father was a parent that he was definitely involved and interested in my gymnastics. But I will say it was, if I could just like kind of paint the picture, he was the parent that would come maybe 30 minutes to 15 minutes left of the practice, and that practice could have been almost like 5 hours sometimes. And so I say that because it allowed me to enjoy the sport and not be pressured at home or why didn't you do that skill? And then also even for reflection, as you mentioned, I've even said this on other podcasts for even speaking about like entrepreneurship, but my dad instilled in me these words I will hold on to the rest of my life, but never fear failure, Court. And he would always ingrain that in me, whether it was in sport, whether it was in my career, if I went out for something new, which my career has taken many different directions. But I hold on to that because there's so much to learn as far as the parent's perspective and the influence that they could have on their child. But then, as you also mentioned, the coach and how the coach could allow the student athlete to really understand the larger picture of sport. That when we see it day in and day out, but maybe there's frustration that is built up. There's a difficult day, but when you expand that lens and maybe even have, Jake, I was going to mention this, but like different sports teams, once those athletes graduate, they're in college, maybe they come back for, Christmas break or Thanksgiving break, but to be able to go back to those teams and simply just talk about their experience can motivate. Because as I told you, Jake, I was 8 years old and I went to Gator camp, and those girls were role models to me in college. When I went for summer camp, I thought to myself, I don't even know college, Jake, at that age of my life, but I want to be a Gator someday. So they really could have a profound impact.
And you're absolutely right. And those are the types of experiences that we want our younger kids to have. Boy, I can't wait to be at this high school. I can't wait to be a
Yeah.
Gator, as opposed to the other, boy, I don't like this sport thing. I think I'm going to go play on my computer or something.
No, it's so true. And I also want to say too, so this is kind of funny. So I actually teach at FSU, so Florida State University. So I'm still for both, but I will say as far as FSU, they did not at the time, they have a club team, but they did not at the time have an NCAA team. So that is why for those people who are maybe tuning in that are Gator fans, FSU fans, wondering what is she talking about right now? I went to both and I'm grateful for both.
Right. No, yeah, you got a little thing called your PhD from Florida State. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
No, thank you so much, Jake. But yeah, both of the schools gave me so much. I'm so honored to have experienced whether it was education or education and athletics at the others. So grateful. And like I said, just the people at both universities have had such an incredibly positive influence on my life. And I think that's another thing is just the community that you build with sport.
No, absolutely. And we talk about the importance for ADs, for coaches, for anybody of building that network. You know, again, for listeners, Dr. Courtney Beck, she is a adjunct professor, at Florida State. She has her own podcast, has a number of things going on. Tremendous resource, for leadership, motivation, et cetera. As I said, she is also a professional speaker. Courtney, if one of our listeners wants to reach out, find out more, let's give them everything. Where can they find the podcast? How can they connect with you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jake. So, as far as connection and just being able to maybe speak with one another, maybe introductions, emails, perfect. So, Courtney at plentyofpositivity.com. I always smile when I say that, but yes, Courtney at plentyofpositivity.com. I am also on LinkedIn. The majority of my time is spent on LinkedIn as far as my primary platform, and that's simply Courtney Beck, but there may be other Courtney Becks out there. So definitely look for founder of Plenty of Positivity, adjunct professor at Florida State. And I'm also on Instagram, and the handle there is at Courtney Ann Beck, my full name. And Jake, I just want to say thank you so much because I want to let our audience know, as far as influence, Jake had influenced me to get into podcasting. And that is something that I just fell in love with. So it began here on the Educational AD podcast. Jake, you've had a tremendous impact on me. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. As I've said many times, I'm only interested in the very best, and you certainly check all those boxes. The podcast, Plenty of Positivity. Check it out. A great variety of leaders and influencers on there that share their own story of positivity. And hey, I think we need a little bit more of that in the world today.
Well, and Jake, it's plenty of positivity, but we also talk about those life lessons, sport experiences, and career experience. So career experiences. So not just plenty of positivity, but life, sport, and career. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming on. Always a pleasure to connect with you and get caught up. And of course, I don't need to say this, but I will. We'll definitely be having you back later for another episode on our podcast.
Thank you so much, Jake. It was great seeing you.
For our listeners, it's always great to connect with you. And just a reminder that we upload the Zoom recordings of every interview to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We do Toolbox Extra just about every week. And like Courtney said, just about every day, we try to share stories and best practices from the world of athletics. So please come back and join us again on the next episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We'll see you next time. Dr. Courtney Beck, please make sure you follow her. Check out her podcast, Plenty of Positivity, and add her to your network. Before we go, we want to have you add these sponsors to your network as well. These are great companies for athletic directors, for coaches. You should be using them. Let's say thanks to Beacon Creative, Vital Signs Wall of Fame. I want to thank Home Campus. I want to thank Booster Hub. Go to boosterhub.com. Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. I want to say thanks to Sideline Interactive and Huddle. We'd like to thank Hometown. That's hometown.com, along with Ohio University and their online masters in athletic administration. And let's say thanks to Gipper. Go to gipper.com. Thanks as always for listening. We'll see you next time on the Educational AD Podcast.